Hello, and welcome to another edition of Your Therapist Needs Therapy, the podcast where two mental health professionals talk about how they navigate mental wellness while working in the mental health field. Maybe I'll get a new intro for 2026. No guarantees on that. The autistic part of my brain really likes having the same intro over and over and over again. What's up, party people? We are here solo this week. We being you, the listener, and me, the recorder? The recordee. Anyway, I'm doing a solo episode. I gave myself a little bit of grace to not stress about having guests lined up for the holiday season. Not that that won't still happen, but it'll be a little bit of a streak of solo episodes here, more than I normally like to do, just because I'm trying to not overwork myself during the holiday season, and I'm trying to not stress out other people. It's really more the latter. It's more me not trying to bother people during the holiday season about recording when they might not want to record, and or we are recording but it's going to come out next year. So a few solo episodes, and that's not always the most fun for me as a podcast host, a content creator. Yuck, both identities I don't like. uh, so how do I make an episode that is both interesting and maybe has some utility? And one of the things that's maybe a little strange about hosting this podcast is I don't talk about my own mental health that often, even though the theme and the vibe of the podcast is very much that everybody needs help with their mental health, even the professionals, of which I am one. And so I thought it seems pretentious, and I'm recording it anyway. I thought I would talk about what I did this year for my mental health. I always ask my guests what they do to navigate their mental health. And that's like fruitful, right? That's interesting to me. There's some common themes because of my specialties and the other people in the field who work with it. So none of this will probably be shocking or surprising, but again, hopefully keeping with the theme of the podcast to normalize that mental health is work for everybody, and to pull back the curtain a little bit on my stuff, because in the calendar year of 2025, it's been a shit show. And having a podcast and a YouTube channel are just slow ways to document my own deteriorating mental health. No, it's been a mixed bag, I would say, for my own mental health this year. I think sort of the standard stuff, having my own therapist, which is lovely, and continues to be an important part. I probably have gone to more therapy at this past year than I ever have before. Just That's probably not true. I've just made it a consistent practice, and it feels pretty much comfortable without being like boring, right? Because I'm aware as a therapist that I don't want to bore my therapist. I want to make sure that I'm not just checking a box of therapy, but actually have things to work on. And so that has been good and healthy for me this year. I started with a new therapist sometime last year, but have continued into this year with that therapist. Somebody who isn't at all in my network, which took not just, I mean, obviously I've not seen somebody who takes insurance, because fuck those insurance companies, but also seeing somebody who just doesn't know me at all, which did take a good bit of searching, actually, between the podcast and some of the other stuff I do. I'm not like well known, but the degrees of separation between people who know me and people who then are one degree separated from me is a lot smaller than it used to be. I just have a much wider network, which is good. It's part of the podcast was to network, so that's good. But yeah, having a therapist who not only is like safely tucked away from all of my professional identity, but also has the specialties that I really needed somebody to have. So that's been a real joy. One of the main things that has always sort of kept me functional throughout my life, as far as back as I have functional memory, has been engaging in sports and physical activity. And this was the worst year for that. And actually, I don't know that it's the most growth I've done. It just sort of made me realize how much of a pillar my health and wellness, my physical health has been, how much of a privilege being able to body has been. I've had a shoulder injury for 20 some years. I quit playing baseball when I was 17 years old because my shoulder hurt so bad. was taking ibuprofen in between innings while I'd being a baseball pitcher. I was like, that's not good. Um, and I went to see the trainer because my dad was my coach, which also isn't good. I get that some people's parents promote them unfairly and treat them as their special little butterfly, and that some parents are extra doubly, triply hard on their kids. And that was my experience, was the latter, that parent who held me back because they needed me to be perfect instead of giving me the benefit of the doubt or letting me stretch and grow in my own way. Um, but yeah, so I had a shoulder problem. Went to see the trainer, popped my shoulder out, popped both my shoulders out, told me I needed to get surgery. I really wasn't having that much fun. See the aforementioned comment about having my dad as a coach, and quit playing baseball. And I think probably a year off helped, but like I was pretty heavily disc golfing. And then when I went to college as a walk on at Minnesota for their men's volleyball team, and um, volleyball swinging always hurt. Swinging, using my arm swing to hit a ball always hurt less than throwing a ball did. There's just less torque. And it would hurt after practice. It would hurt after a long tournament. But by and large, it was functional. I was able to maintain my speed and velocity. I was able to play the way I wanted. And then early in my career, I worked across the street from a YMCA. And so I would go to the Y and play pickup volleyball for a couple hours, a couple times a week. And yes, usually my arm felt like falling off after that, but it just sort of became normal for me that my arm hurt. It would hurt when I started playing. It would loosen up and feel better while I was playing. I was playing for usually hours at a time. And then it would hurt again after. And I just sort of dealt with that for like 20 years, which again sounds crazy. Probably the last 15 years, it felt like that. Again, I coached college, like getting thousands of swing. It's not an exaggeration. Thousands of swings, running drills and running practices over the course of a week just during the college season. And so, yeah, my arm hurt pretty much always, and it would loosen up and then it would hurt after and be sore. So I just always sort of managed it. Um, and this is the year where it finally fell off a cliff beyond what was manageable. It's sort of, I would swing and it would just sort of hang limp. It hurt to swing. It hurt to even try and lift it. I didn't have the velocity. I didn't have the pop that I wanted, that I was used to. I couldn't really jump serve. Jump serving has always been the thing that has hurt the most with my shoulder. So I had to stop playing for a while. I took a session off. I took 2 sessions off. I took one session where I just set, and then I took a session completely off. It's probably the first time in, again, probably legitimately, no exaggeration, probably at least 15 years since I've had a full off season. And that worked wonders. And I had a really good PT. And um, shout out to Good Land Physical Therapy here in Milwaukee. No, going to PT was actually probably the best therapy I had. I shouldn't compare. But no, 20 years of being injured and dealing with this injury, and here in December 2025, knock on wood, it feels really good. My shoulders feels better than it has in literal decades, and I'm playing with no pain. Um, it's still a lot of work to do my exercises. One, I have ADHD, so doing things consistently has always been hard, especially when they're boring. And two, when you stop having pain, you stop feeling as motivated to do the workouts that helps you not have any pain. But PT was really hard when I started. Again, I was in a great deal of pain. Sports have always been my biggest stress reliever, and so I didn't have that, and so that was weird for me, and that definitely took a toll on my mental health. I think I was sort of curmudgeony and crabby while not being able to play, and just like I've worked with so many athletes who have had career-ending injuries, and I've sort of always been like, you find your next thing, blah blah blah. Like we adjust, we adapt, we identify other areas of strength and interest, and like knowing all that stuff was helpful. And still not being able to play sucks. Like there's still that big bummer of it all that goes along with being hurt. And so having to navigate that really sucked. And coming out the other end and being pretty pain free, to the point where people I've played with for a long time have come up to me and been like, "You look good. Like, what's up?" Yeah, that, and not like, again, I'm way past my competitive playing days. This isn't some glory days. This is when you've been playing hurt for so long, it shows up, and when you can relax out on the court and not not be protective of your injured limb, it looks different. And so that's been really lovely and wonderful. And if anything, I wish I would have spent more time looking for a good PT and not basing my experience off of a bad physical therapist, a bad trainer I had while I was in high school, you know, because could have been playing pain free a lot sooner in the process, probably. Although my PT was really great and had some awareness of different body stuff that goes along with being neurodivergent, some hypermobility in some of my joints, some of the core stuff that goes along with being neurodivergent. So they're well informed again to work specifically with me. Um, and that was probably the most challenging part of the year for me was losing the support I had of being able to play sports, and also probably like the best thing to come out on the other side of is to be like it's a fairly joyful experience now to go and be able to play and be pain free. So that's really lovely. Um, so yeah, when you need a specialist, when you need to get something taken care of, like to find that person who really vibes with you. I don't want to get preachy in my like here's how my mental health went episode, but like we as therapists, I as a therapist say this to my clients all the time and then struggle to sometimes apply it in our own lives. But like truly finding somebody who is a good fit for you and who not only personality wise but also professionally makes a world of difference. And so yeah, that was really lovely. um I have slept really poorly this year because I have two elderly dogs, and one, if not both of them, generally get up in the middle of the night. And that's been hard, but that's been, again, sort of mitigated and navigated. My partner and I sort of try and take turns. She's a very deep sleeper, and I am not. So usually I get up just because I happen to be up because I hear them get up. Um, but if that's gotten a little bit better, trying to just again keep our dogs healthy and fit. You feel bad not giving them water, but like also just needs to not have water at night. Otherwise, she won't make it through the night. She doesn't make it through the night anyways, but she'll drink a whole bowl of water and then need to go like 3 times. So that's been hard. And just again, a reminder of like sleep hygiene and how important that is. A few years ago, I talked about having an Aura ring, which is the wearable tracker, and I like those trackers. Not forever. I don't have one on now. Um, but I think as a baseline to sort of take stock of where your physical fitness, your wellness is, everything's a subscription model, so you got to pay for that shit. Which is why I'm sort of opposed to them for like lifetime commitments. But to get that baseline, I think is really nice. I think it could be too much data all the time forever. But the idea of where my sleep was got better a couple of years ago. Then it's been bad this year, but it's been an awareness around the double whammy of being hurt and my sleep being bad was hard. But otherwise, I've mitigated it pretty well, I think, for knowing my sleep's not great. I've been trying to be slow and kind and gentle for myself, knowing my sleep's off, knowing I'm getting the hours of sleep that I maybe want or need, but always interrupted. And so, probably not in that deep sleep stage that I need to be. Um, the world has been a fucking nightmare this year between Trump 2.0 presidency, the general stupidity of people who are not well informed about what that includes, people who didn't read Project 2025, people who are in denial watching Project 2025 be put into place. This is an ongoing battle. This is something a lot of clients bring up. Like, how do you balance being informed and also not like hating everybody all the time and hating everything, and then eventually being burnt out? And again, I've built this network. I've built a community in my life that feels pretty good and values aligned, and ethics aligned. Some of them are therapists. Some of them are very specifically not therapists. The helpfulness of having children who the world is still bright and shiny and wonderful and new is helpful to cultivate some of that childlike wonder in engaging with the world and not being bummed out about everything all the time or being mad in principle that things could be better and so that we're mad that they aren't. um but yeah, some of that community, I've always sort of had those boxes of like, here's some professional people I know, but like here are my volleyball people and here are my board game people and blah blah. Like those different categories have always served me pretty well. And again, the volleyball community generally is pretty good for me. That being injured this year was hard, but I've played more D&D this year than I ever have before. shocking for those of you who know and have heard me talk about my board game collection. I am a nerd, and the board game stuff has always been there for me. When you have little kids, you lose some of that because they don't have the attention span. Even some of my games that I have that are specifically designed, kids' games suck, right? As parents, I think we can all admit that like Hi Ho Cherry is a trash game, and Snakes and Ladders is not fun. Snakes and Ladders, Shoots and Ladders. Are there snakes? Maybe that's just the version we have. Anyway, but have it like a game like Plunders, there's no reading involved, so you can play with younger kids. There's pirate ships and a hurricane, and it's fun. So having some of that stuff's always been good. But yeah, D&D, I'm a late convert. I stayed away from it when I was younger, knowing sort of I would be addicted and probably have poor time management with it. So I've read a lot of D&D novels, but I hadn't played until a few years ago. And then I played more this year, and then I got Baldur's Gate 3. I know I'm recording in 2025, 2 years past Baldur's Gate being of note. But having like a way to play D&D by myself has been really helpful for me. And so a little bit of that escapism, I think, has, again, all of this was facilitated to cover up or make up for what sports did for me for so long. And so I think that has been really helpful. D&D is a good, engaging way for my neurodivergent brain to have something new and novel continually and still keep it interesting. And yeah, I've got an in-person D&D group that are lovely and a lot of fun to play with, and then having some of the virtual spaces, and then just like being that D&D nerd who like watches the professionals play Dimension 20 and Critical Role and some of those campaigns. I've not certainly watched all of them, but watching more of them and not like, just letting myself enjoy that as it's sort of intentional getaway. It has been harder to ignore the real world, even when people text me like, I'm reading more and I need fantasy in my life because the real world sucks so hard. And it's like, oh yeah, let's go read about dragons hoarding wealth and how that's not a metaphor for the billionaire ruling class. I'm a ruiner of things like that. So having something that really does provide some escapism has been really important. And that has been predominantly D&D, I will say. And then just trying to be intentional. Part of, again, being soft and gentle and slow with myself while dealing with an injury has been reading more, trying to be not scrolling, trying to not be, reading 9 think pieces about how the Supreme Court sucks and is corrupt and is there any hope of salvaging it? Because the Supreme Court is like a real bad one for me. I can read a lot of horrific shit, and I work with trauma and religious trauma, cult survivors. The Project 2025 stuff is all horrific, and I feel like I need to stay on top of it for my job. But the thing that upsets me beyond a reasonable degree is the stupidity that is the Supreme Court. And so, again, just trying to like balance that stuff. I've made a point of reading more often this year. I love reading. I've always was a voracious reader when I was a kid. And I lost some of that. Some of that comes with having little kids and not having a ton of time uninterrupted to really get into a book. But reading graphic novels and comic books has saved me a lot, and given me a lot of that escapism I was talking about earlier with D&D. But this year I've gotten back into some novels and even reading some nonfiction, which has never been my favorite thing. I think there are a lot of therapists out there who love to read every like memoir about a mental health issue, and I've never been that person. Memoirs are, even well-written ones, are kind of boring in my opinion. But like, again, I do therapy, so I'm getting a lot of that stuff live as it's being written. Uh, so I've always been a much bigger reader of fantasy, but reading some of that stuff, for about 2 months there, everybody who talked to me, I recommended reading Forest Euphoria, The Abounding Queerness of Nature. That book was awesome, and I still recommend it. It's on my coffee table in my office right now, just sitting there as a recommendation for anyone who comes into the office. And that book was really helpful for me. I mean, that book as a memoir is really great, but it's also nature-based. It talks a bit about trauma, it talks about late diagnosis. So a lot of my boxes get checked certainly by that book, but it just was kind of a joyful read, which again, I think we all sort of need. And so trying to find other books like that if you're a regular listener to the podcast, I've had Jared Anderson on, and I really like his poetry collections and also his memoir, Something the Wood Loves You. So those kinds of like they're mental health related, but they're not like bummers. And right, like as a society, we like to track murder podcasts and true crime. CSI was the number one show on TV for a long time, and like there's that like trauma porn, murder porn. I refer to it generally as trauma porn, like watching and reading and following horrific shit that serves some utility in our brain. But when everything actually is shit, I don't know. I have a hard time engaging with that stuff. Even as somebody who grew up like being pretty hyper focused on serial killers for a while, I can tell you a lot of things about H.H. Holmes and the World Fair. Um, it was nice to have some books that were like joyful and fun. My favorite author, Stephen Erickson, had a new book that came out. Maybe I should do like an end of. I hate like the Spotify Wrapped. Such a like wanking motion to like look at me. I'm the main character. Here's the things that I liked. Like, bruh, if I cared what you liked, I would have worse taste than I do. Um, the so yeah, I've been more intentional with reading. Still reading comic books and graphic novels. I mean, just absolutely spoiled creatively for graphic novels and comic books. I don't know if there's been a better time to be a fan of that medium. So lots of really great stuff there. But yeah, being more intentional with reading, that's all been again an intentional push to be slower and kinder and gentler, and sort of my approach to myself and how I spend my time. It's been intentional to like also, again, as like a fantasy author, comic books were easy for this, but finding that balance between like reading for pleasure but then still making it about work, right? Like that's a thing I think a lot of therapists struggle with, myself included, is like, oh, there's a new book about cults. I do religious trauma, let me go pick that up. I own my own business, I can make it a business right off now to go buy that book. And then like, it's not a break. It's not rest. It's interesting, it's engaging, but it's not rest. And so really been trying to be more intentional with this. And again, this is all stuff, right? That if you've heard me have other guests on, if you listen to the podcast, watch my other stuff, like, I talk about this stuff and promote it for other people. And so this is not, this episode hopefully isn't just navel gazing and like, look at myself. And, this is again, acknowledging that even when we know this stuff, even when we say this stuff on a weekly basis to other people and we teach people how to do it, and we help people find these things, it's still work and effort to do it consistently. Like none of this is easy, quote unquote. It gets easier the more you practice it, and it's still effort. It's still work to maintain it and keep it in a healthy range, especially when, again, like something gets thrown off in your life, job change, in my case, an injury, adding a kid, losing a pet, whatever it is, like family drama, work stress, life stress. It is a stressful time to be alive, living through late stage capitalism's collapse while I'm on team collapse, and I'm rooting for it to change into something different so that hopefully out of the ashes of it all, something new and healthy and more sustainable can grow. Doesn't mean it's fun to live through the collapse. So it has been a stressful thing. And so there's been a lot of intentionality on like revamping and being, trying to be not critical of myself, but have some analysis for like, is this doing what you want it to do? And so, yeah, reading's been really great. Pro wrestling has been a through line through my life as well, just my fandom. Um, as somebody who uses athletics as a coping mechanism, sports have also always been that. I find a harder time in my wizened old age here being a fan, being a true fan of sports teams now. There's just so much capitalism and greed and the betting commercials and all the bullshit that goes along with it. You can't tell me that these games aren't rigged. Um, and pro wrestling's always sort of just been like, yeah, the thing that right, it is rigged because it's a story. It's a story about a wrestling league. It's not true sport. It's not true competition. It's storytelling using a competitive medium as its route to tell that story. And so, I mean, just a banner year for some pro wrestling, and then really terrible, like, again, really hard to disconnect from the dystopia of late stage capitalism around it. And so I've divested from WWE a long time ago. Pretty much once Lucha Underground came out back in like 2014, I stopped watching. I stopped keeping tabs on WWE regularly. I can tell you who is in it. I don't know if I could tell you who the champions are right now. I could get it in like 2 or 3 guesses, though. I'm not, like, totally out of the loop because I just follow wrestling, and when you follow wrestling, you're gonna get some of the major headlines for all the major companies. But I watch All Elite Wrestling, and, it's Wednesday nights are their flagship show, Dynamite, and I watch that with my boys. They get to stay up. They usually don't get screens during the week, but they get to watch wrestling, the first match or to the first commercial, whichever one is longer. And so that's a lot of fun. AEW is phenomenal. Where WWE is like full blown mega and fired all their lesbian wrestlers this year and have just been really terrible. AEW has been really great, and it's sort of weird. Wrestling is for everybody. Here are all these different types of wrestling. Here are these engaging characters. Here are these long storylines, and then like just banger after banger after banger of really good match. So it's been really great. Again, that disconnect, that break from reality. WWE doesn't allow for that because you have a sexual predator and you have people who are, you know, being awful to each other, and then you just have general right-wing fuckery, and like the capitalism and soulless nature of it have been really terrible. So I really try to avoid any of the WWE stuff. um I'm not even exaggerating. If anything, I'm underselling how terrible WWE has gotten. um and the quality of what they put on screen is also really terrible, whereas AW has been pretty good. And are there still things broken in the wrestling industry for both companies? Yeah, absolutely. And watching stuff from other countries too. So that's been really good. It's been really fun to have um, kids who are coming up and getting interested in it has been really fun. Like that's a highlight of my week, to be able to watch wrestling with them and listen to them talk about wrestling and watch them get into the storylines and boo the people who they want to boo and cheer for the people they want to cheer for. So that's been really good. And then, yeah, I mean, I think at this point in my life, I have better community than I ever really have, certainly professionally. Personally, it's a work in progress. Not, I'm just a prickly person, and I'm an introvert. So I don't need, it's not like I don't have good community. I just don't engage with it probably as often as I should. But some of that is just, I'm a homebody. I like hanging out with my kids, and they share a lot of my interests. So that's very easy and simple. And a lot of my peers personally have similar life setup. So we all sort of have kids in that busy stage of life, but still get together with people, still hang out with people. But I think it's the other stuff that really balances me out. And having a good professional network is, as a therapist who owns his own practice, it can be a little bit of like being on an island in a while. And it really has never felt like that for me since I've opened my practice. But that's been work and effort, and just a joy to connect with like some really wonderful people. I have a group of therapists internationally that I get on a Zoom call with once a month, and that's really great. And then I have the podcast where I get to talk to people, and then I have my local therapy friends, who we meet at various times, whether it's, hey, let's grab lunch, haven't seen you in a while, or it's a standard meetup to talk case consultation or whatever it is. That part of my life has been really great. And I would say like above and beyond, even what I ever experienced when I was at an agency or a larger practice. It's just been really lovely. So all those things help, all those things take the edge off, building community and investing in the future that is like worth living and better than what late stage capitalism sells you is really great. And it mellows you out. It has mellowed me out, I will say, from being sort of doom and gloom, everything sucks all the time, to like, yeah, of course everything sucks all the time. That's intentional, and you don't have to participate in that. And that's privilege, that I can do that, and that's also been a lot of work, and it's been a lot of effort from other people to build that community with me. This isn't me, again, patting myself on the back, sort of saying like, hey, it's cool, I get to participate in some of this stuff. And all the things that I teach people and recommend for people and try and promote for people, it's like, yeah, you gotta, the whole point of this podcast has always been like, it's work for us therapists too. And like, we don't know more than you. We might know more than you, but like, it is an equal amount of work for us to integrate those things into our life. And that remains true. But yeah, those are the things, walk my dogs regularly. I like time in nature. It's been a weird year for music. If you follow any of my work on YouTube, I do a lot of like song reviews, not because I know anything about music, but I talk about the mental health concepts in different songs and the lyrics in them. Um, Usually music is a great source of dopamine for me, and I've listened to a lot of old stuff, like a ton of Pink Floyd, a ton of System of a Down, lots of Glass Animals. So the music that I listened to and I found that was new this year was pretty much like Brian Eno's and Infinity Knives new album got a lot of play for me. Um, and I found Archspire this year, which is a metal band, a technical death metal band whom I love. But usually my music is all over the place and very eclectic, and you can sort of see like, oh, here's a band I only listen to them for like 2 straight weeks, and then I only listen to this for 2 straight weeks. And I had less of that than typical. Usually it's like month to month. I have like 12 brand new genres or musical acts or albums or whatever that really catch my attention. And for whatever reason this year that was down. But I had some consistency with some oldies but goodies and some things that I really again, maybe that reflecting in real time here, maybe that has been intentional for like rest and going back to some of those old favorites is helpful sometimes. Sometimes you just should rewatch Arrested Development. Um, it's not a thing I did this year. I just finished rewatching Frisky Dingo, which maybe I'll do a separate review of. Some of it aged very poorly. Obviously, some of it was in poor taste when it aired. Um, it's a very interesting show reflecting. They just predicted the future pretty like eerily accurately. So if anybody has a contact for Adam Reed, let me know, because I would love to pick his brain on like how he came up with some of those ideas that proves to be so true. Um, but yeah, sometimes we need those comfort shows. Sometimes we need to return to something, especially in a period of rest and recovery. So yeah, that's been a lot of my year. It's been having to do a lot more intentional stuff for my mental health that isn't just sports or physical activity, because working out and competitive sports have just carried so much of my mental health for so long, and very effectively so, I would say. And this year with an injury that really sidelined me for the first time in my life, an injury I couldn't just play through for the first time in my life, changed a lot for me. So yeah. Again, I don't think anything earth-shattering here. I think the stuff I talk about regularly because it works, and I obviously see it work for other people's lives, and I see it work real time for my own life. But switching it up a little bit, I don't like doing an episode about me. I don't like selling my own stuff. I don't like promoting my own shit. This is all uncomfortable, and yet there's a consistent listener base, and I like to pretend they're just tuning in for my guests each week, even though I know that's probably not accurate. At least not the consistent piece of it. When I get a bump in the analytics, then I know that. But very cool. Again, like it's just very cool to be able to do this and connect with people and have useful conversations and get helpful feedback from folks. So love all that. I think that's enough. I like the phrase navel gazing. I don't know if that's one that people use regularly, but yeah, there's a navel gazing aspect to me talking about my own stuff, but perhaps it is helpful from time to time to pull back the curtain and let people see that, like, yeah, the running dialogue in my head is me saying something pithy or that sounds very smart or is based in solid research, and then just the running commentary in my head is like, but what the fuck do I know? You know? And the answer to that question is like a lot, and a lot more than like Joe Rogan, but also, you know, nobody has all the answers, and everybody's doing their best instead of having it figured out. We're all in this together. I was almost broke into song there, and I remembered I was recording, and so that's not a thing that'll happen. Yeah, hopefully we can hang out for a few more solo episodes here, and then kick off the new year with a bang, with some very cool guests and some people who are lined up, and just difficult to on my schedule often to schedule with people. So thanks for hanging with me in these digital connective spaces. And we'll be back next week with another new episode. Take care of yourself. Take care of somebody else. Peace.